Welcome to this special edition of Clot Chat, where we discuss the challenges and issues faced by female researchers as part of our Women in STEM initiative.
It's something we've really struggled talking about this in Reading over the years. And it's the sort of fall off as you go through the career structure, because I think some of the reasons why, for example, there are fewer women who are heads of schools, for example, is that because there's a fall off as you climb the ranks, as it were, within academia, to the point where there are fewer women to choose from. And so it sort of follows that one follows the other. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to think about why is there this sort of fall off as you go through the academic career? And it's really interesting in the life sciences that certainly at the undergraduate level, we have slightly weighted higher in women than men. And then postgraduate, it's sort of 50-50-ish, but the balance is sort of pushing slightly the other way. And then by the time you get to lectureship, it's that you can notice a substantial difference, and then it just gets worse and worse. And the problem is that when you advertise for a position, the candidates who come forward are the candidates who come forward. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about why is it that we don't get so many women applying for these particular types of roles. And so I think that there are sort of some underlying issues that are not easy issues, but somehow they're influencing this sort of trajectory. Of course, there's a lot we can do with in terms of considering how we support and encourage and ensure people maximise their potential in their careers when they're there. But it's trying to understand that pathway. It's a bit frustrating, actually, trying to sort of think about how to address this.
It was a year or so ago, I saw a presentation from the BHF, and they were particularly looking at the gender distribution across the different stages. And very similar to the stats you just said, at postdoc level, it's 50-50-ish, maybe slightly in favour of females, but around 50-50 mark. And then as you go higher to fellowships and the chairs, there's a huge drop off in females. And they're obviously trying to address it, but as John said, it's a real difficult situation because there's multiple things involved in that, and I don't think anyone's really driven down into what's causing that disparity. I would say childcare and having children is a massive factor, mainly because the timing at which you're at that crucial stage of your career for a female is also that crucial time of childbearing age. And the two of them, it's very, very difficult to manage.
Well, I think what Sarah is saying is exactly right. It's that crucial timing of when people become independent, and that is about childbearing years. And that is between that and short-term contracts is really, deep rooted into the issues that we have, and that is where we see the biggest fallout. It would be interesting, just going back to the framing of the question, Amanda, to know how much it's changed, perhaps even just in the last 10 years. Has there been any incremental differences in the number of women that we're seeing in certain roles? It's a huge struggle, I think, by the time you've got children and you're dealing with that in an academic life. Fortunate, in terms of my personal experience, to jump through the hoop of independence hoop before I had my first child, and that made a huge difference to me. Whereas I think if you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, if other people have had different experiences, but I've always thought from chatting with other people, if you're at the postdoctoral stage and you want to move to an independent stage, because not everybody does, but you happen to have had a child at that point, and then that can be a barrier. And so those are the types of things that we need to address as to why that is such a barrier. But certainly, I think the short-term contracts and the insecurity once you've had a family as well, and that impacts on men as well as women, obviously.
Away from having children, it's hard to even think about getting the next job for a year or so. Like, where are you going to live, let alone when are you going to start a family, sort of thing. So it's a bit tricky in the future.
I haven't had children yet, and I would really like to start a family, but there's that constant fear that I don't really know when the right time is, compared to so many of my friends that don't work in academia, that their opinion is very much like, well, it doesn't matter. because if I go and have children now, somebody else just does my job for the like 9 to 12 months that I'm off for, and it doesn't matter, they'll just find someone else, and I go back and it really doesn't matter that I've been away. When in contrast, you know, I'm like, well, you know, grants have got to still be written and grants still have to continue. Someone might take my teaching, but you know, it's that, you know, that balance. It's like, when is the right time? And with fixed term contracts and moving from different post to different posts, when do you get full maternity cover? Like when can you afford to physically take it as well? And I know but it's something to consider from in the sector, that there is that, you know, there are different policies everywhere, not every institution is the same, and it's things like that I think also need to be considered.
I think I agree with this, and I think it's multifactorial. But I mean, because obviously I came from France and different labs, and I can say across, there's one important factor is how much support you have from the lab, and I think this is key. It can make it or break it, because I from my experience in the lab where I had support, I could still take care of my son. You know, I could still do normal things, but still like do my work and publish and do everything. And I felt it very difficult moving to this permanent, more, you know, PI position, because as of course all my personal life still go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have children. I've just started my postdoc position, and the one thing for me is like, I'm not local to Manchester, so if I was to have a child now, I'm not planning on. I don't want a child right now. It's like you have no support, a lesser support network. Like, you know, my parents aren't here, my partner's parents aren't here. It's stuff like that, and I think I would always ideally like to go back to my home city and settle down for good. But it's whether you can, if there's a job there for me to carry on to after I've had a child, or along those kind of lines.
But I would also like to say I did have 2 kids as a postdoc, so it is possible, and I guess I was quite fortunate that the Wellcome Trust at the time in that enabled my contract to be extended, so I could still have that maternity leave. So it is possible. So hopefully that gives hope that it is possible to have kids while you're a postdoc, yeah, hopefully I'm living proof of that.
I just wanted to pick up on the maternity leave issue, because for me, as a gay man, it's not something that I've ever really had to think about, but it also seems completely alien to me that, you know, this isn't a new concept. So like, why don't universities and grants have this kind of built in, you know, as a contingency? You know, it's not like women in science have just appeared. You know, it seems something that's really easy to plan for in terms of, you know, arranging that funding to kind of make sure that there is that equality of opportunity there, and, you know, you don't get forced into making these decisions of, you know, is it the right time? Because that shouldn't be the question based on career.
Yeah, I mean, universities do have maternity leave policies before it sounds like they don't, but there is the issue with they have different versions of it. So some will stipulate you have to work there for so long, and that period of time that you work there is different. It's not the same across all universities. And so, you know, there might be a university where you only have to work there for like half a year, and then you're fully covered, and that's fine. But there are others where you have to work there for much longer, and so you then have to start that balance in your head, like going, well, do I do it now but not get full cover? Can we afford this? And it becomes a whole thing. And then obviously if you're postdocing, you've got a fixed term contract. It's like, you know, also you've got to work, you know, you're thinking about that, you know, and working it all in. So, you know, having, that leave itself is is something to you do have to annoyingly consider, and like, has it going through your mind on top of everything else that you're also trying to balance.
Even there is mechanisms in place, and these have, at most universities, got a little better in terms of the whole Athena Swan, because they're doing things like, for example, what you said, Amanda, they're not making sure that you've worked there 6 months, you know, that, and if you have, then you don't have to, you know, and you don't go back, you don't have to pay back that maternity leave cover. So there is small increments in there. But one of the main issues, again, it comes specifically from being a scientist, is that while you may be able to put your grant into abeyance, for example, if you're on a fellowship, or you may be able to, or you can take it directly from the university. What you can't do is you can't put your laboratory on maternity leave. So if you've got PhD students, postdocs, your technicians in your lab, you can't turn it, they're still working, they're still going on, their grants are still going on. And unless you're within, like a bigger department, like say, for example, Birmingham, where there's other people that could potentially really help with supervision of other members of staff and students when you're away, then that becomes like a massive challenge, because you can't put that stuff down. You can maybe put the teaching down, but you can't put the lab down, and not put them down like that, but put them, you can't put them to the side. So that for me, was a big thing. And you don't want to let people down either. You've got students that are, finishing their thesis, so you end up reading their thesis while you're on maternity leave. You've got somebody that really wants to get that paper in, and you've got I still had weekly lab meetings with my lab when I was on maternity leave, because I didn't want to have that disconnect from them and feel that I wasn't supporting them as scientists. So that's one of the major, and I don't know the answer to that, but that's really challenging.
One thing to just bear in mind is that having a family doesn't necessarily work to a timetable. And so it's all very well to say, oh, well, I'll fit in having a family at this particular time in my career. Some people, it never happens. So I think that's another pressure that maybe also plays into this. And obviously, the older someone gets, the more they may worry about that sort of thing, quite understandably. I was also thinking about Scandinavia. I don't know if any of you have ever visited a university in Scandinavia. They have amazing setup in that country for family leave after having a child, and it's expected that the man also or the partner other than the mother will also take time off as well. That is an expectation, and the support. But trouble is, it's a government top-down sort of thing. The support for this sort of thing is substantial, but it clearly makes a really big difference.
Thinking about women who do come back from sort of maternity leave, and how hard it may be to transition back into work, to transition back into the lab that they haven't been in for the past 6 months to a year, or whatever time that they decided to take off for their maternity leave. And maybe the whole sort of working group and the peer mentorship can really work in learning from others, and how women can settle back into work after a period of leave and sort of overcome that guilt, and maybe sort of avoid those pressures of feeling that we need to work 100% all the time, because there will be other commitments that those will be involved with.
Then when I go back, maybe I have some problem to back in time, back in the same point of my career as I left. It's difficult. It's not easy, because I know many girls that have to left after, because they need 6 months, I would say, but of course it's more, to have a baby, and then when they go back, other people arrive and the situation change, and people do your job, and so maybe it's quite difficult if you stay away for a little bit. I don't say it's impossible, of course. Everyone can do this, but a man normally don't have to leave.
Most departments now have really strong procedures about what happens before you take maternity leave, how it will be what will happen when you take the maternity leave, how you'll keep in touch during maternity leave, and how you'll be supported when you come back. For example, within the university, I don't know whether this works for other universities, a chunk of your leave allowance, a chunk of the money that the university gets for you going on leave, comes directly back to you when you come back from maternity or paternity leave. And you can use that money for whatever you want. And that could be buying out some of your teaching time. That could be having extra admin support. That could be going to conferences because you feel you've missed out on going to conferences over the period that you've been off. It could be for paying for childcare. So actually, there really is, a wholesale change in how we support people who take that time off for caring responsibilities. We should also say that this doesn't just apply to maternity and paternity leave. It can be for any caring.
Do we think the system is accepting of that? So the question is if you are a female postdoc who has had a baby and so has taken some time off, and you are now interviewing for a second postdoc or whatever your next postdoc is the person reviewing your CV acknowledging that you took time off compared to the male postdoc or the female postdoc or the other postdoc that has 2 more papers than you do?